Hello everybody. It looks like I already have a viewer there. What an amazing thing this is. It is Thursday, May 26, 2022, for posterity's sake. And I'll do my traditional process of popping out chat. I'll do power tools. It's clear at this point this is wasting time at the beginning, and out of respect for your time, I will take the advice of my viewers who have told me I should probably do power toys to have this all set up and working. But that wasn't too hard. There's my chat. You may chat to me. I check whether I have the Great Karnak running, and I check whether it's actually working. The time has come, the walrus said, to write a web crawler again. So, it's fair to say I've written web crawlers before, and it's a fairly easy task, as long as you avoid recursion. Avoid recursion. It's tempting. It's awesome. It's not nice to the memory of your computer, nor to knowing what's going on. It just lets things potentially run out of control. And yes, while you can keep recursion under control, it's a bit dangerous. So for anyone who's wondering, what's recursion? So here's a function, def foo. And foo takes bar as an input. And then foo, let's see, how does that work? Foo is called from within foo. And so to begin recursion, all you need to do is call foo with some value. And so that value will be fed into function foo, which will call function foo, feeding that value into it. In fact, I think I got that wrong. No, that's right. Yeah, foo calls foo. I was thinking I put foo in where bar is, but it needs to pass values. So that gets caught in an infinity trap. It seems like a good way to write a browser, a crawler. But this is better. For X in Y, call foo and plug in bar. So it'll just call foo calling bar Y number of times. Or a maybe clearer way to say it is for X in range, say 1,000. So you know what Y is looking like. So these are two different approaches to writing a crawler. One that seems to do something until the crawl is done, right? This is the alluring way to write a crawler. And this is the practical way to write a crawler. And you're like, well, how do you know it's ever done? Well, at this point, you can do nested loops and do it for another 1,000 out there. And at least that way, it's like 1,000 times 1,000. And, you know, you're dealing with squared functions or squared numbers, and you can go up to really high numbers. You can get to 1 million, you can get up to 10 million, but even the best crawlers out there, like Deep Crawler for SEO, have these limits of like, 1 million, because once you've visited 1 million page, your data is growing big and a lot of resources are used up and you've waited a long time. And it's just ridiculous to have the notion that you should write a system that can do much more than that initially. First, you avoid infinity, or I should better say in the positive, first you write a system that does things a finite number of times, and then you increase that number to get up to where you need to be, and you can look for it being finished. You can always check for things being finished, so you don't need recursion to go while a value is not empty. So anyway, that's where we start this, and that was the reason for my little poem at the top of this this broadcast. Time to toil, because I'm going to be up into the night doing this, and I have aversion to recursion. So here we go. It's going to work on it's going to be based off of yesterday's work. It follows onto yesterday's video of Python dictionaries, dictionary persistence. Thanks, and I should say Python dictionary high performance persistence, thanks to SQLite 3, built into Python, but generally inaccessible for fast key value pair parenthesis NoSQL. Is that still a thing? Do people still talk about NoSQL interface? It's usually row and column, which slows you down mentally. Mentally. It slows you down mentally. You have to think about rows and columns, which it's a lot to think about. When you think about just key value pairs, you're really not thinking about much, so you can plow through it very quickly. All right, so t-shirt reveal time. The wolf. The wolf. This is one of the few t-shirts actually picked out for me by my kid when they were too young at this point. They must have been like 3 or 4 years old. They're 11 now, but picked out for me and, stuck with me. Sometimes I'm the wolf. Sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning and decide it's time to toil into the night. To toil or not to toil? That is the question. Yeah, sleep is good. But once you've got enough uninterrupted focus time that is out of time for getting into the zone or the flow is good too. One must balance the two. And so this is the balancing of letting myself have nice focus time and getting enough sleep. So I did get to bed early, like 10 p.m. or so, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. So 5 hours of sleep. That's all a soldier needs. Let's do some soldiering. One, two, three, one. Notebook. It's not all about the tools, but sometimes it's about the tools. So, to review yesterday's work, this was crawling a single page putting the result of the crawl into this database. It is nice to know, always good to remind oneself, deleting a SQLite database is no big deal. It's lightweight IT tech liability. So to have a real database in the picture is usually a tech liability. It's not with SQLite. And that's an example of it right there, the ability to just arbitrarily delete a database. Even though, we were recently running the code, it seems like there should be a file lock, and there will be file locks. It's just not all the time. It quickly releases the file locks. In fact, after the commit, see, this commit is the only place where one of those operating system type file locks is created. And as soon as that commit is over, it's released, and there's no hooks in it. In fact, these files, those DB files, are so interoperable. They're one of the great interoperable file formats of computers and technology. They can flow between iPhones and Windows and stuff as readily as JSON files. So let's get to it. We're already writing something into a database based on a value that's set here. And I'm going to give it the home page instead of some subpage. The home page being this here. And it will give pathways into the About page, which will lead to my old site, which actually has quite a lot of content, all these links down here, of which every single one has that title tag problem. It doesn't have the title tag that it should. This headline here should be here. So the crawler is going to ferret out lots of problems. Okay, so like that 30,000 foot view before we begin. Well, it'll also crawl my new blog, which also has that title tag problem. And that 30,000 foot view I'm discussing, we have to get a handle on the issues going on in a website. Is it targeting keywords? Is it a spider trap? Wasting resources? And, spider traps are things like, calendars, surfable calendars with no end. If you create a calendar and put it up there, you could go next in the date forever, into forward in time, forever back into time. So surfable calendars are spider traps. Infinite pagination, all kinds of things. There's lots of things you can do accidentally so that there's no end to the crawling, and you want to reach a finite end. So other things like, is it targeting keywords covers so much, like title tag, keywords in URL, headline like element. And, I want to put off page anchor text, but really we're going to get to that later. That is a slightly more sophisticated crawler than what I'm about to do. We could use the data that we collect to do that kind of analysis. So we're going to pull the whole site down quickly into SQLite. Time to add that to my spell checker. And yeah, that's it. That's what we're about to do. We're about to pull the whole site down. We seed it with a home page, right? So when it enters here, it's going to plug the contents of the home page into the database, and then we could actually look at it. So let's actually do that. This pip install SQLite needs to have been done, and before very long we will be using stuff inside of my package. So pip install -u for upgrading, even if you don't have it yet, ML SEO. You got to do those two things. This is going to install a whole lot of things on your machine, a lot of things that I consider dependencies, requirements for the system. You know, I'll just venture into that for a moment. I'll pull up another terminal just so that you understand a little bit of what I'm about to do. I drop myself into my GitHub folder. I cd into ML SEO. ILS to show you the stuff that's in there. Not very much, but of the stuff that's in there is the part that's actually used by NBDev. Jeremy Howard's little thing, the creator of Fast AI, made something that turns Jupyter notebooks into pip installable packages. And settings.ini is the master file where all these things are set. And so I'll do Setwrap so that you can see the requirements. I install OAuth, which is for Google Cloud Service, Google Service Login, Natural Language Toolkit, HTTPX, which is an alternative to the request library. Oh, I have OAuth in there twice. I gotta, whoops. It's that important. Pandas, something called art, something called rich, TLD extract, yake, beautiful soup 4, SQLite dict, which you see me using, Puppeteer, LXML, pip dependency tree, and OpenPyXL. That's a fair amount of requirements, because each of those has requirements in turn. And, you know, for doing Google authentication, for example, it's going to grab a few more things. So there's a sort of cascading tree of dependencies. And so when you do this command, it's going to put a lot of stuff onto your machine. I'll do a little example. It's going to tell me all the requirements are met because my machine has already had this done. But that's the magic fairy dust that needs to be sprinkled in. And it's a lot of different bits of magic fairy dust. This, okay, so there you have it. This is a long list of stuff, of requirements met. It's going to say requirements met, requirements met. So we'll get rid of that. And this next one is for the magic fairy dust to make SQLite dict, or to make SQLite work on the Python dictionary API. So you have dictionaries, Python dicts, that are made persistent through the power of SQLite. Very, very powerful. A good alternative to using Python shelves. So standard library does have something built in to give you similar functionality. It's just slow. Slower than me getting to the point. So this is us importing these two things. I'll use a request. So even though HTTPX is a requirement I use out there, you know, this is kooky enough. I'll keep the rest of the web crawling as understandable and straightforward as possible. I will not do concurrency. Concurrency is possible. Concurrency is supported under ML SEO. Concurrency is a little bit mind-blowing and is not really necessary for small sites. We're going to think sequentially. Initially, sequentially. That's important. While we could do asynchronous concurrent web crawling for some real fast site slurping, we're going to do sequential page fetching for simplicity's sake and to make a point about starting small on the crawl. Don't go for 1,000,000 pages initially, especially when getting started learning Python and crawlers. Time enough for ×10 complexity later. Now I try and manage that ×10 complexity as much as I can. I don't like thinking much about concurrency, but you can use it without having to think much about it. But not right now. Let's see, anyone? Bueller? Hey, there's people. Good. Feel free to type to me. I will answer your questions. You will help guide the session, and let's do it. Import the libraries. Set a URL. Yeah, it already says 3 because I ran those pip installs. So let's make it say 1 so it's a very clear picture of what's going on. There's no code run other than what you see run right here. Import libraries. Set the seed page. Fetch the seed page. Put the seed page into a database that you see created right there before your eyes, and then take a look at the keys that are now in the database, and the key is the URL. Using URLs as database keys is key. I cannot emphasize that enough. That is really important. There are many choices for database keys. Using something that is unique is a good idea. Okay, and just for review's sake, we're sitting on top of a response object, a requests package response object. One of requests models is a response that contains all kinds of stuff. You want to see the headers? I'll show you the headers. There's the headers of the request. The stuff that is normally like mysterious to SEOs, it's just part of the request's response object. When was it? What was the cache control, the expiration, whether it accepts cookies, all this kind of stuff is just there for you to, to look at. The server that's being used, look, the server is github.com. Nice stuff in there. The response code, the status code is one of the most important. Was it a successful page load? Success, 200. 200 happens to be a successful page load. So for people who are not really into it yet, you do need to know there's a protocol called HTTP, and you should know it. Even though everything is done with secure mode now, you want to read the original RTC, RTF document, request for comments, HTTP, request for comments spec. You want to know what HTTP is? You read the original specification for it. It's going to look like gobbledygook to a lot of people, but work on it. Look at it, power through it, and get all those original principles that the people who invented this stuff. Vint Cerf is one of the key people. There's two parents of all of this. You know, there's a lot of them. You can see their names up here at the top. But two that you really gotta know have made everything the way it is Vint Cerf and Tim Berners, B-E-R, Berners-Lee. I hope I got that right. Might be you, Berners-Lee. Sorry if I got that wrong, but these two people are the internet and the web, respectively. And so these people wrote the specification on a lot of this stuff. Let's make sure I got Tim's name right. Yeah, B-E-R, so I'm gonna fix that. And the documents you got to know, in this case with Vint Cerf really, is this document. The HTTP specification request for comments, because, you know, they don't work in a vacuum and they ask for stuff. So I'm not going to go through it, but you do need to know there's really important principles here to just know what you're doing. You look at someone like me and you're like, how does he know that stuff? Well, at some point I powered through this document to know a lot of the unknowns that people who are in the echo chamber of SEO don't do. Don't be, you know, beholden to the echo chamber of SEO or any other field. Go to the original sources of information. All right, enough preaching, right? Still getting to the point. Well, the point here is that we've started a web crawl. We actually have the first seed page in the database, and that's a pretty good place to start. And all this is just to show you that we're sitting on top of some data from one loop iteration, because something important to know about Python that's kind of different from other languages is that scope, the creation of local variables that get created for their local context and then destroyed for memory's sake when that local context is exited, which is normally confined to things like def foo. There's a function, a equals 1. A is local to foo. A won't exist outside foo. So when you exit the function, A is gone. It's a memory cleanup sort of process. Now that's not true in a loop. In a loop, resp, see, here's the for loop. It might look like it's a with loop. It's not a with loop. The with is the context manager. So that's really important. With it indicates the Python, because it's a very Python thing. The Python context manager, which avoids explicit opening and closing of files, okay? It's not a loop. It just means that when you go back out from the indent, because with does have an indent, right? This is indented for the for here, so it looks like it's a loop. But when the code exits the indent, meaning getting past this point, crawl.db, remember I told you in the previous video, it represents a physical connection to the file system, to the hardware. There's a lot of construction, there's a lot of resources marshaled and put into use, including locks. Teeth are put into it. Traditionally, you have to explicitly close that, or it remains open. So in Python, when you leave the indent under a with, all that cleanup is done automatically. In fact, I ought to point that out because there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of magic in here that you really won't appreciate. To do everything it's doing, it looks like very small code. Well, there's a try finally in here, and you really ought to know it. In the same spirit, I'm showing you the RFC for the HTTP protocol. You need to understand that Python. There's the browser wars going. Python context manager try finally. It's the exact equivalent to a try finally. Okay, so this is kind of an example. To do what that simple little with statement is doing, you would have to create a structure that is a lot like all these things it's showing. Basically, you're going to have to do something and then try something and then finally something and do the cleanup. So there's a lot of code, and there's just a lot of little different opinions on things. Clearly, there's a lot here that, is people are talking about on the Stack Overflow page. There's better examples out there. Oh, medium.com, terrible site because the paywall. And look, it doesn't even, never click a medium.com. Yeah, you get the point. There's just a lot of code that this is alleviating you from. You don't have to have, explicit closing of this database, right? Because there should be a db.close down here if you didn't have the context manager. And okay, so enough on that. This is very little code because of a lot of really good thought on behalf of Guido van Rossum and the other people who brought the context manager to Python. Okay, the last thing you need to know is that that resp object is inspectable outside the loop because loops, context managers, for loops, do not have scope. They don't have their own scope. So resp slips out of the for loop, slips out of the context manager, and is available for inspection here. What other things can you inspect? You can inspect the text of the page. This is my home page. Now, it's not a lot of HTML, so it's a great example. You can see the link to my home page. You can see, I'm sure in here somewhere is going to be the link to my other pages. There's the blog. It's not hyperlinking them, which makes a relative versus absolute link problem, which we're going to fix, right? Because how do you know what web page to load? It also looks a little bit all run together like gobbledygook. So use print around it. It's Jupyter Lab that's allowing it to show without a print statement. But if you use the print statement, it, ungobbledygookifies it. And you can see the whole HTML document. Open HTML tag, open head tag, my Google Analytics, the title tag, which is messed up, all the metadata for social medias, and the ending of the head tag, the beginning of the body tag, just classic HTML. The end of the body tag, the end of the HTML tag, which is the whole document now. I got a mic. I like to talk. I like to talk into the mic. I love the mic. I'm mic loving. I've got some tales, so let's begin. And one of my tales is the tale of the non-recursive web crawler. So, let's get some links other than this one that I'm starting out with. How does one do that? Well, one, import from MLSEO, import star. From MLSEO, import all is what that says. Now, it could just be import MLSEO, then every reference to the things I want to use inside the library, I'd have to proceed with a precursor MLSEO. So the pandas world does import pandas as PD. So we could do like import MLSEO as ML. And then I would just do ML dot everywhere. But none of those are quite as easy as just having the names of the internal functions of MLSEO just there ready to use, like extract title, extract metas, and all that stuff. So we do that. And on the first time MLSEO is imported, you will see an invitation to run me, drink me, eat me, run me. So I kind of lay out a little Alice's Adventures in Wonderland kind of thing for you. And the second time you import it, it'll be much quicker and it won't have that invitation. So if you don't like looking at it, just run it twice, which is safe to do. Very Pythonic thing. You can re-import libraries as much as you like and it won't really re-import them. You have to get explicit about it. All right. So what does that give us? I guess I will run me. I'll show you a little bit of what it gives us, right? So there's a rabbit that you are chasing. To chase the rabbit, run look. Okay, let's run look. What is it telling us? Fig is not defined. So this is a work in progress. So chasing the rabbit is not something that's easily done, but I do have a Figlet library that I can import explicitly here so that you can at least see that. This is a little tangent. This isn't necessarily what you need to do. It's going to be easier than this. So there's the importing of the art library. Call this an extra bonus. I'll probably delete it out. And once the art library is sitting there, I make a fig function. It's not the third occurrence. It's not the second occurrence. Well, it's inside a lot of things. That's kind of a bummer. Okay. Wow. Yeah, this is for chasing the rabbit reasons. I am going to have to defer this for a little while. The best laid plans of rabbits and men, huh? All right, so instead of showing you everything that's built into MLSEO, following the Alice in Wonderland little adventure, which is not exactly ready for prime time, I will just show you the code internally, right? This is the package. I always keep it loaded. So I guess that was the reason I was destined to do that, because I do need to show you that MLSEO is demystify it, right? It is a package that gets put in your, place where pip installs go. Pip install will dump this into that same location, and it's going to make a whole bunch of functions available to you to use locally, which we are looking through right now. There's extract apex. That's a really good one. Extract meta links. Extract links, that's a really good one, really necessary for our next step. In fact, why even go any further? We're going to extract links. what are we going to extract links from? Here, let's give this a name. It's time that had a name. It's a web crawler. Okay, and we're sitting on top of resp.txt, as we showed you, which contains a variety of links, including absolute ones and relative ones. But if you wanted to extract those links, you would extract those links. There they are, relative turned to absolute. And you can see there's some repetition there because, you know, one thing I don't do, well, no, not really. There's with and without the trailing slash. So that is revealing issues with the site. That could be two separate URLs. How do you know that? Read the spec. If you have questions about the ambiguity of whether a trailing slash really is a different URL or not, it is. It's a different URL. They're made to appear very much the same, purely out of convention. Convention brought about by the Apache web server that does an automatic redirect, usually from the non-trailing slash homepage version to the trailing slash homepage version. So this is converted to this automatically by Apache. So most people just put the trailing slash there in the first place. I do, clearly. So already I've revealed an issue of the site. But now we've got some links. What do we do with them, right? They're just sitting here. Well, they should probably be inside the loop when we're sitting on the data. RESP has been put into the database here. RESP has been put into the database, the response object of that first crawl. If I were to execute it again, it'd put it in there again, put it in there again, put it in there again. But because the key has to be unique, there's only one record in the database. Awesome, right? So inserting these links, they need to go somewhere. Where should they go? Well, hey, look, we've already got an open connection to the database. We're already sitting on top of the RESP object. Why don't we at this point say links equals extract links resp.txt? Why not? The answer is no reason. That's exactly what we do. Are you with me? The clouds part, the angels are playing their trumpets, and, you know, things are revealed. Things are revealed, including the temptation to feed the output of a function into the input of another function for recursion, because for those whose minds are racing, you can see you're one step away from crawling a whole site. You just feed the links back into this loop, and you make this engine of slurping down a site. And so many people do that on their first or second or third attempt to write a crawler until they lose their hair from frustration. You see, I got all my hair still. This is because I've discovered, as powerful as recursion is, it's not always the best idea. I'm not even using functions. Very contrary wisdom. Very contrary wisdom. Don't always follow the common wisdom. Those folks are talking in forums and Twitter because they don't have work to do. I'm doing this at 4 a.m. 4:20. It's 4:20 right now. 4:20 a.m. because I have no time. And I do have motivation. And so at 4:20, I show you stuff. Celebrate. Celebrate good times. Come on, get to the point, Mike. We don't have all night. So this is where I check if you're there. Yeah, okay. You know, some people are there. I also check if someone says, oh, people said stuff. Look, who's talking? Jur. The response object also supports caching pseudo session information that can be saved and loaded. Yes, yes. Beyond the scope of this session. But yeah, I am completely with you. It's highly used on my concurrent work. You don't want to slurp a site simultaneously without it looking like the same web browser as part of the same session. So there are really strong reasons to keep your build up and tear down from occurring over and over. It's somewhat of an inefficiency. But, oh, and it tips your hand to the website that, you know, you might be a crawler, as does not setting a default user agent. But there are things that are going to be beyond the scope of this first video, my friend. I am 100% with you. I hope you're still there. Reading manuals is common knowledge that isn't common, unfortunately. Yes, yes. Thank you, Jer. Stay with me. Let's riff, We'll riff back and forth. You send stuff and I'll make sure I cover those topics. So first of all, thanks, Jer. There's stuff I'm not covering, like HTTP sessions. Huh? Same as a browser. Login is still logged in on your second page load. Otherwise, you'd be logging in an awful lot on websites. Session is, persistence of certain data, often cookie-based, not always. Less so all the time now because of the anti-cookie tracking movement between page loads. I'm also skipping over user agent stuff. All right. So we execute that. I'm sitting on top of the links, right? I can get rid of all this. And just again, to remind you how little code this all really is so far. People say crawlers aren't much code. It's true. Crawlers are not much code. Oftentimes it's because you're pushing the work out to other things where the code is hidden. And what really is quite complex, and I'll just run that twice to hide that. What's really quite complex is being made to look very simple to you, right? So still, those keys haven't been used. When we step through this, it's not showing those keys. Now let's, instead of printing just key, let's print key and, well, the length of resp equals db key. Okay, that puts it back into there. But while we're sitting on the key, oh yeah, you know what? My first thought was correct. We move the print statement beneath that so that we can at least do, say, the length of resp dot text. Okay, so you can see a number. That's just the byte length of resp dot text. And in fact, I'm going to do a length for a length equals that so that I can show a len in here so that I can reveal a very important pattern where we set a len to none and we try setting it based on the response of an object, except pass, very unPythonic. Sometimes you put in ... to avoid everyone screaming at you about a naked try pass, but sometimes it's deliberate. So that sets the stage for actually doing something with these keys. What would you do with these keys? Well, you're not going to find an infinite amount of links on a page, are you? Maybe. I don't know. An infinitely long page, infinite number of links. Let's assume there's a finite number of links that you found on a page. Here's your database commit. This is when it's written to the database. What if for link in links, we set db for the link, because remember, the link is a URL. The URL makes a great key. Equals what? Are we going to fetch the page? Is this recursion? Is that where he's going? Oh my God. None. Bam. Now let's iterate through our keys. All right, well, one little mistake. The home page should not equal none because that is in there. For key in database, resp equals db key. Did I overwrite the, oh, let's see. Yeah, I did overwrite it because it has a link to itself on the home page. So there's different ways to go about this to make sure that we don't write a link into here that is already in the database. All right. So first of all, just absorb this. It really did do what I wanted it to do. It took all the links that was found on the page and wrote it in as a key. We've got some duplicate content issues, but that is going to be one of the things we diagnosed about the site. I'm going to go back and remove links to blog without the trailing slash. It shouldn't be that way. This is the kind of pedantic, meticulous, under the scrutiny of a microscope, everything mattering, weakest link in the chain approach that separates SEOs from spinners of BS spinners. This is knowing your stuff. Using Screaming Frog and wondering about these issues, it's not so much knowing your stuff. Whew. All right. Just a check to see who's with me. Yeah, still people there. Feel free to chime in. Okay, so the next step, this is that time where you take a deep breath and you go, whew, I wish I could know what keys were already in the database. Well, there's a very Pythonic and wish it worked every time way of doing it, and memory efficient way of doing it, in fact. And then there's a less memory efficient but more explicit way of doing it. All right, I'm going to do it the more explicit but less memory efficient way so that you understand it and so that I know it's going to work. You've got a connection to the database here. You can say keys equals db.keys. I know it's there because I've done this kind of stuff a lot before. And then I'm going to do a very Pythonic trick of raise system exit. I think that's it. Raise system exit. There's a few ways to do that. Yeah, system exit. However, I am now sitting on top of keys so that we can look at it. It's a generator. This is the kind of show-stopping stuff that so many people would be stuck on. It's produced as a generator because such a statement, that database might be huge. And you don't want to dump every key of the database into a value called keys, or else that could be a huge object right out of the starting gate. So the people who created the API for SQLDict Lite, which I have renamed SQLDict, knows that when you call the keys method of a file-locked database object, to use something called a generator, which does not load everything into memory. Yet you could still step through it once, forward only, firehose style. Oh, so much I'd love to talk about. For key and keys, which could create a naming conflict because I think I use key somewhere. But print key, just to demonstrate to you that those keys are there, and no attribute select for key and keys. There's always something. Instead of iterating, because it's self-connection, select get keys, has no object. We're gonna, you always have to rerun these types of things because forward only generators might have been destroyed after accessing them. So I'm just going to try converting it into a list, right? Keys, same as no select. Okay, so we might be sitting on something that has to be called like a function. Not callable. And then we're going to look inside of it. Close, GI code, GI frame, GI running, GI yield from, send, and throw. Huh. I'm going to try doing it the other way. Maybe maybe the library itself has improved. So this kind of hacky stuff that I wanted to do for implicitness shouldn't really even be necessary. I'm going to show you the way it should work, and hopefully it will work that way. So instead of trying to get the keys, we simply do the much more desirable if link not in DB. One line, right? It's so much better. If link not already in DB, so much more Pythonic. Beautiful. Thing of art. But to make sure it works, I'm going to delete our original database. I'm going to restart kernel and clear all outputs. And this is from scratch again. You're going to see the invitation to chase the rabbit. That's about the biggest downside. There's so much on the import of MLSEO that when you restart the kernel and load everything, it's kind of a long wait, and I'm tempted to run it twice to get rid of the MLSEO rabbit chasing invite. But now it works exactly as it's supposed to. I will keep it Pythonic. Isn't that code much more beautiful than what I was about to do? Creating a keys thing, checking whether the link was in the list of already keys. This is whatever memory optimizations are gonna be done, are supposed to be done. It has been done here. You know, the implementers of the SQLite Dict package have done it. I use it. Code remains simple and beautiful and Pythonic, right? I could do this all over again. And the results are the same because predictability, you know, predictability in your crawler is so important. This is why I avoid recursion and stuff. So if I didn't use recursion here, if I didn't turn this into a function and feed the output of the function into itself to take it further. How am I going to take it further? By the way, I might add that this thing, which looks like it's part of the code, is not. That's just display. The crawler so far is, let's get rid of our cell blocks. The crawler so far is what's right here. This is our crawler. It's the whole crawler so far. It doesn't crawl a whole site, but it crawls the home page or whatever you seed it with, and collects all the links into the same database that will eventually hold the content for those links as well. It's a key without a value, key with no value set, right? It's beautiful, you know. It's no multiple tables. There's no rows and columns. It's one table, which is a key value pair table backing up a dictionary API, which is just key value. Do I show you stuff? Do I show you an insider's view to that database that's being created here? Oh, okay, I'll do that. Ugh. All right, I even lost that person. I hope there's still people here. This is a big one. I rarely use database client software, aside from Python, but when I do, it's DB Browser for SQLite. Thank you, my coworker Tim, who turned me on to this. So that crawl.db is looking a lot like key value pair data in there from a Python dictionary. But I tell you, it's row and column data of a much more Microsoft Excel or traditional RDBMS SQL system. And we can find that by File, Open Database. As is always my habit, our first click is on GitHub from Quick Links. It didn't default us to Quick Links. That's a little disappointing. And we go into Practice 2, and we go to CrawlDB. I wish I had a bigger font for you, but we can go into Browse Data, and there is our key value pairs. Something that has data, the main homepage load here. It's a blob. You can't tell the blobs from the nuns because the key value pair, the technique that's being used, is it's being turned into a binary large object and just being plopped into the second column named value. Consequently, a row and column database system is turned into a key value database system using the exact same trick that the very popular Postgres uses all the time to say, you don't need no stinking NoSQL. I'm NoSQL. We have the optimizations that turn RDBMS into row and into a key value pair. Same with SQLite under Python with nothing outside the standard library except for a very, very lightweight pip install that gives you the API to use it like a dictionary. Now, what we do have to do here is quit out of it because that creates a file lock and would prevent me from doing that casual delete I like to do. In fact, even doing that is risking not being able to delete it. But I think it's written well and it's been around a long time. Okay, so what now? What now? We turn this back on. We remind ourselves now that this upper block does all the work so far, and this lower block just steps through it and sometimes encounters none. How do we turn those nones into actually having the data of the page? Oh, well, if not resp. All right, it's important to know that when I say if not resp, it's the same as saying if resp is none. I think it's is none. Sometimes it's the double equal sign equals none. But, you know, the very Pythonic way to do it, because Python, you know, evaluates everything that's, falsy as false. None is about as falsy as it gets. So you can go if not resp, so that's saying, it's another way of saying if resp equals false, because none would evaluate the false. It's Python. I can't teach you all Python in this, but if not resp is a very Pythonic way of doing it. So it's gone through all this. It already knows that, there is no length to it. I could have tested it based on that. And in fact, we might get rid of this because it's just for display. I'm going to get rid of it. We don't need that. We're trying to make this as beautiful and short as possible. So we don't need that anymore either. You set resp equal to db key. If not resp is equal to none, then we do what we do up here. Oh, look at that. This is wrong. That let me think that through. No, this is an initialization process. This will never occur more than once. So having that resp being set outside of all of this is actually appropriate for an initialization step. We initialize the first data write. We initialize first data write. It's special. This is not the crawler. This seeds the crawler with the first seed URL of the crawl. The resp equals is therefore outside of all this stuff, but it will not be here. If not resp, then resp. You need resp. You can't not have resp. Except URL is no longer the variable name here because it's for key and database. Then what? Can you guess? db for the current key is equal to resp. Now we've crawled them all, except that isn't showing because that a length is carried over. You think that's great success, but it's the same number on every one, so it tells me right away that it's not really true. So we're going to do we're going to show the type. About one of the only safe things to do in this case is to show the type of resp. And the fact it's going to be a requests object every time is quite good because, otherwise it would be a none. Let's see what type of none is. A none type. All right, that makes sense. So you would either see this or none type. All right, so the crawler is kind of close to being finished in this much code. Not bad. Not bad at all, right? Except we want it to crawl the whole site. I've got a lot of links. Not that many, probably about 800, I would say, 800 pages. So how do we know these are different from each other? Well, let's do something, right? So if type of resp is not equal to the type of none, print. Now we know we can do the length because we know it has the attributes inside. If it's not a none type, it's going to be a requests object. It still could be a 404 or something. I don't think we're going to encounter that issues. It's a little bit fragile what I'm about to write, but the length of resp.text. So you can see they're different pages. I wanted to show that they're different numbers, except for these two, which are kind of, duplicate content issues. But this is how you spot duplicate content issues. One has a slash, one doesn't, and they come back with the same number. That can't be good for Google. This is an SEO tutorial. It's just not this advanced stuff. Everyone thinks it has to be so advanced. If you don't have this basic stuff in your fingers, intuitive, like, of course it works this way. I could even delve into whether it's an Apache server or not in this discussion, whether it's Ruby on Rails or not in this discussion. Because Ruby on Rails uses directory names without a trailing slash, or the equivalent of file names without an extension. Very non-standard. Yet another thing that's wrong and bad about Ruby on Rails. This at least is saying I am deferring to the default file type that the web server cares to serve as the index file for a directory. I know it's a directory, I know it's not a file name, but I also know that the web server will serve something by default as its index file. It's explicit. This is very, very ambiguous in, traditional web server terms, and it's what Ruby on Rails uses for its default search-friendly URLs. Oh, yet another reason that was a fad, and it's thankfully out of most people's systems now. Use Django. If you want a robust, stable content management system for the web, a web-centric CMS, use what Instagram and everybody else in the world uses without being all fatty and fringe tech. I mean, fringe is nice from time to time, but not in your day job. Okay, so let's turn it into the real crawler. First, I do a check for you folks. I'm losing everyone, right? It gets interesting and you all drop off. Anyone there? I got 2 likes. That's good. Chat stuff. Yeah, he'd love to banter, but he goes to work. That's fine. Keep up the good work. I can tell you're knowledgeable as well. Yeah, Jer is a knowledgeable person. So thanks for your feedback. If other people join in, great. If not, I'll just wrap this up pretty soon. You can see where it's leading, right? I have to get the links off of subsequent pages. It can probably be done in this exact loop, and that is why we do something very, very similar to recursion here, but not. In fact, this probably is set so that if you run it again, we have, let's do for I, comma key in enumerate DB, and then when we print, you can print I here, I plus 1, so we see it start from the numeral 1 instead of the 0-based index. And yeah, I think I'm going to restart kernel, clear all outputs. I think I'm also going to delete the database. So now we do this. We'll see the invite to chase the rabbit, and we'll just ignore it this time. And then we'll do this one. And you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Let's do it again. Oh, okay, it's not quite what I want it to be. It just goes 1, 2, 3, 4 over and over again. That's because this part is not in here. So it seems a little bit redundant to do the same code in 2 places. One place where we initialize the first data write, and another place where we process it, assuming there's data in there. Is it really that much code to duplicate? So there is the write it once people. They're very dry. There's a crowd out there that is so dry that they insist you don't repeat yourself. Not even once. If you do, they will be all over you like someone who learned Java in Comp Sci 101. They're wrong. You can repeat yourself, especially when it's a joy to look at, hey, you do one time this thing that initializes the first data write of a crawl. It's a good idea to keep it separate in your mind, even though the processes look the same. Even though you're copying and pasting code from one place to another. Oh my God, you have to write a function now. No, you don't. You have to be able to read what you wrote. Now you have a list of links out of your resp. Now there is some error checking I should do here, like trying. You don't know it's a real, good response object. And I'll put the tries and stuff in real soon. But oh, the DB commit. Wait a minute. Oh boy. My test wasn't valid. So before I put this line in, I'm going to restart everything. It's not a big deal, right? Not the biggest deal to do that restart, but the recurring running of this to see whether that number is getting bigger. Well, I know it's not because the extraction of the links isn't in there, but at least now there's the DB commit so that you know it's a valid test. Without that, there's still unknowns floating about. So the reason this number isn't getting bigger is because these new resps that are being found are not having their links extracted. So I will put the check in it, if resp, because it might be none, links. And so for the dry crowd, for the don't repeat yourself crowd, let me say it again, for the don't repeat yourself crowd who hate when you repeat yourself, links equals extract links from resp.text for link in links. Oh my God, he's repeating himself. This is the exact same code he did up there. DB link equals requests.get link. We don't need a commit. We could put a commit there. So commit. But, we'll be kind to the file, right? It'll load it up in memory. If there's 1,000 links on the page, there'll be 1,000 links in memory before it gets to the commit from getting out of those loops. It's kind of like recursion, but it's not really recursion. This is not feeding itself back into itself. But let's see what happens. First run. Second run. Okay, there's something that's not happening the way it should. Oh, if not resp. This is just kept fetching the pages. Yeah, okay. If not resp, then resp equals getting a key, writes it into the database. Now you're sitting on top of a new resp. Links equals extract links from the new resp.text for link in links. DB link, is it conflicting variable names? That's always a thing to be aware of. Nope, it's the first time I'm using it here. For link in links, DB link equals request.get. Do I have a try here? Import requests, plural. I must have a try somewhere that made that silently get through. Oh, nope, still not. Oh, it might be the outdenting? Well, let me make sure that the printing of what it found, we're going to get rid of this whole thing. Just have the structure here. And every time it's sitting on top of a new link, print the link. I'm starting very low in the flow, so there's two ways to do this: start low and go up, start high and go down. So I'm starting low and going up, and that wasn't it. So for I comma key, so we can just print key. This is from high up going down, so that's a good response. If not resp, and see, it's just not going through this because there's no nuns anymore. When there's no nuns, it's not a valid test until I delete this. We initialize the database. It's created. It's got the first page of the crawl in the database. Now we do the subsequent pages, and each time it puts a page in memory, or in the database, in memory to go into the database, it will print the URL. All right, now we do it again. These are different URLs. Those are the same URLs. All right, so we're clearly making some progress, right? Not as much as I would like, but we're on the verge. We're on the verge. So, crawlers are mental challenges. I should probably put the chat over here next to that. Yeah, because there's people chatting. I write pretty regularly web crawlers. I'm thinking about writing my own web crawler framework or using an already existing one. Oh, and hello to another person. Yeah, it's a really good idea to put this chat window on my Jupyter window now, because you should chat to me while I'm working. And I guess I'll turn this off to make a little room for it. Slide that over there, click this, and use arrow snap happiness to do this. And we certainly don't need Karnak anymore. None of this is about Vim. Yeah, so there's a lot of web crawling frameworks out there, especially in Python. Scrapey is a popular one. So the thing about them is they invent their own languages. Now, I invented my own languages a little bit under ML SEO, like extract title, extract metas. But my languages I'm inventing are all very SEO oriented. They're just the tasks that SEOs need to do. Scrapey, very powerful web framework. Scraping framework for Python lets you do all kinds of stuff. And it's worth using, but it's overkill for my purposes. So anyway, I just got a little debugging here. In fact, I'm going to see if I can keep that thing on the side displaying. I wish it could be smaller, but it's not terrible. I don't have much left to right scroll. We'll live in that cramped little space. Hi. TTZZ, TT space ZZ, and hi TADJUJUIDJE. All right, let's fix this little thing that I have going. It's always finding the same links. Clearly there's something that I'm not getting right. So one of the first things to do is to just trim back, right? and I'm going from the top down. If not resp, these are the only times I'm showing it. So that's remaining null, right? So these might be pages that actually aren't there and can't get set correctly. At this point, I may want to, just to know what's really in the database, step through this and say for key in DB, print key, right back where we were at the beginning, to see how many URLs I really have. It's significantly more than it looked at first. And I can also print next to it the type of DB, plugging the key in to know whether I have an actual response object or a null. Maybe I should make the font smaller. Sorry, folks, but and in fact, the response type should be at the beginning of that print statement so that line wrap weirdness doesn't occur. Nice and fixed first position before the URL occurs. And we look for nuns going down there. And we see actually we've done a pretty decent crawl. And now we actually want to enumerate for key in I, comma, enumerate DB to see if the number of URLs is changing every time after I run this. These are just the stubborn ones that can't crawl. I've got links that just keep coming back none, and that print was inside if not resp. That's why that was confusing. Key error 73. Sometimes when you put a key in for a database, if it isn't there, it's going to throw an error. For key in I, comma, enumerate database, print I. Yeah, all right. So we're going to show that pop from the beginning. Well, no, wait. This worked without the I in there, didn't it? Whoops. No, that had that error. I'm going to even take the, oh, geez, in I, comma. Geez, I just put that in the wrong place. For I, comma key in enumerate database, that didn't look like that should have been an error. It's just user stupidity. So it's going from 0 to 73. So the question is, when I run this again and it shows those two same URLs again, is it still only going to go up to 73? Yeah, it only still goes up to 73. So this is supposed to acquire new links that are discovered. No, this is supposed to acquire new links that are discovered, and this is stepping through them, and it should be larger every time, but it seems to be tapping out at 73. And the URLs that it's getting are all from my my blog sub thing, and not from other paths that exist down through my old site. There should be the about page in there. See, the about page isn't, oh, there it is. And the about page has a pathway into my old blog. So it looks like it's tapping out at 73, and it should go past that, but I need to take a little break. My brain. So feel free to type to me, and I'm just going to drink some coffee and go into a fugue state. I'm going to test. There's a real test that can be done here. First, I'll see if you're with me. Yeah, you know, maybe there. I don't know if you're there or not. This thing seems quite unreliable, but I do see people who are typing recently, so, and it's still streaming. That's good. So how do we test? My concern is with the about page. We find where the resp is set to getting the key. If key equals the URL that I'm interested in, raise array ISE system exit. Delete the database. Clear all output and restart kernel. Seed the database with the home page. Run this until, colon, insert indent. Okay, so it got to it real quick because it was on the home page, but now because of scope, resp is sitting there for inspection. The About page has links to my old site. All right, so now we track this. Why isn't the old site showing all the links on the page? I didn't mean to do that. Hello, me and Google Glass. I had access to Google Glasses from my employer at the time. Well, no, that was actually when I was consulting. I had access to Google Glass from more than one source. So we want it to stop when it hits my old home page so that I can inspect the links that are gotten with extract links from that point. It should have stopped right there, you know? Okay, well, it's not a valid test until we delete the database, restart, initialize it with a home page. Yeah, you're with me. Okay, excellent. Yeah, do not trust the YouTube view of who's with you on live streaming. The first run might not get it. That's actually expected because the home page itself doesn't have that link on it. It has to go through the About page in order to encounter that. And oh, it says 3. I mean, it's not getting trapped. If key equals, now that might be a diagnostic thing. Is that a real URL? I thought it was. Yeah, there's that. It looks like a real URL, and it's full of lovely links. So we're going to do, this is the kind of ability you just need to have by hand. Now, granted, I'm debugging, right? I have something wrong in this, but still, nonetheless, I know that I can say, you know, data equals request.get, that URL, and then I can extract links from data.text, right? This is what an SEO should be able to do, right? This is, you know, screaming frog, yay, yay, yay. But honestly, you know, there's all the links off of my old homepage. A lot of links there, right? See that? This is what should be got into. There's some like 800 links in there, which is why I said my site is probably 800 links, because all the new stuff added together barely equals this. So we think it through from kind of almost from scratch, not quite from scratch, but there's little enough code here that thinking it through as if from scratch is not really that excessive. I get rid of this stuff. It's distracting. We don't need it. We'll keep this because it's a pure way of just stepping through the keys in the database to see what's really there. And then we look at this, which has a logic issue. This seeds the database. It seems to be doing it quite well, and we'll always have one key at the end of this process. Just hit the delete key, Mike. Just hit the delete key. It makes it faster. Reset kernel. This, not a problem here. Top thing works real well. Make sure of that in your mind, because otherwise you're skipping over where the problem is. You'd be creating a blind spot. But I am sure if it gets into this step, that top step is working well. So we just comment everything out for a moment, even the commit. And we say, you know, we're populating a response object with a key data, you know, response object. We're creating a response object from each key in the database. So let's print the keys as we encounter them. It's also worth noting it is not adding it to the database because the commit isn't there. All right. So if not response, print key instead of just printing the key there. Yeah, and 3 things that were found. Oh, but it's not my main site. That's okay. It shouldn't be my main site yet. Makes it difficult to debug when it gets to the main thing, but we will bring this line in, and it should be setting a response object equal to request.getKey. And that looks good too. And at this point, we can print the type of response. That way, whether it's a request response object or a none type, it'll still print successfully. That's what we're trying to do there. That's the important thing to know. And each one of them creates a good request response object. And it's good. That's really good. We really don't need this logic, this trap here, because what I'm doing now is the debugging. It takes the place of that. There's less code to look at. So I got it. Oh, Mike. You can't set the response object right back to be the none type. Oh, wait, no. That is, it's getting request set if. I thought I had it, and I didn't, so we're printing the type of the response. If it's a good response, okay, so checking types is often kind of weird and often requires one more import. I'm going to test that import right up here. So we need to be sitting on top of something called a response. It's kind of a bummer that you need to do that when you do a type test, but it helps. It helps a lot. If type of response equals the things you do to avoid typing, equals response. Now you can print, because you know you're sitting on top of a good response object. You can type something like resp.statuscode. Oh, print That's more like it. That's what I was expecting. So now you can do something like if response.statuscode equals 200, now you can say links equals resp extract links from resp.text with a lot more confidence than we could before. And in fact, we can print the length of the links we find. 7 links found, 69 links found, 69 links found. All right, see, getting somewhere. For link in links. And this is certainly where the don't repeat yourself crowd is going to chime in going, it should be a function, it should be a function. Maybe we do a function at this point. But we're not writing it into the database. We just know that we're sitting on top of the links. We're just writing the links in as none. We're writing the links in as none. None. For link in links. DB using the link as the key equals none. Maybe that's where I went wrong before. So each time you just have more links in there, that each time you run this, it's going to discover those nones and then crawl them. And then we put a for x in range outside of there and increase that range number until the crawl finishes and comes back empty. In fact, I'm so confident with that kind of stuff that we get rid of a lot of that. The crawler's easier. I was making some critical flaw in logic here. And we can commit on an inner loop. But I don't think we're setting the database equal to the actual RESP object. We do need at least one DB, and in this case, it's definitely the key equals resp, not resp.text. We're saving the whole response object, including the headers and the status code and all that stuff. And you know what? Just for if type resp equals response, it does have a response. It has a response. That DB commit belongs there. Every time a good response object happens, we will commit it. So if it equals that response, and we'll record it whether it's an error 200 or not, or a good response 200 or an error. So it goes into the database either way. That way our 404s and stuff are recorded. Much better. Much better. Now we're crawling. Now we're crawling. Now we're crawling. Now we're crawling. You should be obsessive about obsolescence proofing. We're getting an error. It's if this really is an HTML document, maybe it's XHTML, you can ignore or filter this warning. If it's XML, you should know that using an XML parser will be more reliable. To parse this document as XML, make sure blah, 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 blah. So I'll suppress that warning at some point. It found feed.xml, right? So that's because it found a sitemap link. Now it's crawling. Now it's crawling. Anyone with me? You still with me? Tajude J. Cool handle. But I was saying there should be somewhere over 800 links on my whole site. So, now you're seeing a lot of that taking place. Back to 2012, I was a prolific writer. I have come and gone with this sort of stuff. But I promised you writing a web crawler. And in fact, it's, you just watch that scroll enough. Let's go into Explorer again. Start typing GitHub. Go into practice 2. Oh, I wish these fonts were bigger or easy to make bigger. But you'll see all the activity, all the file write activity now on the crawl. It looks like it stopped, but I'll flip back over there in a second. Oh, it didn't stop. It's still going. You'll see file activity. The journal file being created temporarily. Whenever you've got a database system, you're going to have something called a journal system generally, which is just a transaction log capturing stuff into memory and then into a text file before it gets committed to the database, so that you don't miss data, so that data doesn't go corrupt, so that you've got transaction mode so you can roll back groups of things at one. All kinds of reasons these journal things are necessary. So that's what you see momentarily appearing and disappearing. So this whole web crawler is written with one IPython or one Jupyter notebook, one crawl database, and a seed URL. And the size of the code to do this, is this. That's the whole crawler. Now, honestly, I'm going to put a for something and something here, and then this is going to have to be rerun until you get all the pages. But, we'll formalize that. There, it looks like it got done. So right off the bat, I do know that, it's nice to see the number of pages. It would be nice to show the enumeration here. So the print is here, and the I is already there, so I could have been doing that. And it's nice to show when it gets to the end of a loop to just print done, right? No reason not to print done. And I can just do this again because there will be more links found. There's going to inevitably be a few more nones that were created, that were found. And let's see what kind of mistake. SQLite failed within 5 seconds. So that's just timeout equals, say, 20 seconds. Because all that journal stuff that it's doing with the files, there's some overhead there. And sometimes it needs to catch up with itself. And if it hasn't, it will have that timeout error. So as simple as this stuff is, there's still some inside knowledge you need to get. And you do that by going to the PyPy or the GitHub pages on these packages. I'll show you that. While this is going. So how did I know about that timeout? Well, because I pip installed this, and if I pip installed this, PyPy, pypi.org, is going to know a little something about SQLite dict. And oftentimes the dictionary or the documentation is just right on here. So, timeout. No, not in that case. So if it doesn't show everything it needs to, you look to see if there's a link to documentation here. And if there's not, if it doesn't give you everything you need to know, there should be a. How could it not have timeout on the page? It talks about the context manager. This is the stuff I was telling you about. Otherwise, you need to do db.close. You don't want to start dealing with opening, closing if the context manager is available to you. Project description, release history, download files, homepage. Okay, homepage is probably going to be it. We'll just make sure. Go to homepage. Homepage is GitHub. That was the other thing I was about to say. If you don't see what you need on the PyPy documentation, you want to go to the GitHub page where the code is almost certainly maintained. No timeout there. So GitHub may in turn have another link to documentation. Well, okay, so if it doesn't and you need to know about it, and the documentation doesn't show, everything has its own kind of version of built-in documentation. All right, it got to done on that, and we can repeat it. But before I repeat it, I will make sure you understand what I'm talking about. We have imported this stuff and renamed it on the import, right? So normally the documentation would be something about that, but because we did all this renaming, you want to do a dir on this. And I call it documentation, but really it's the internals of the thing. I don't even see the timeout. Well, I'll get back to you on that maybe. However, I knew that there was a timeout on the open. Maybe it's part of the context manager. Timeouts could be part of the context manager the way I'm using it with SQL dict, because, no, it's an argument. It's an argument of SQL dict for sure. So if it's not shown as one of the internal properties or methods, there's oftentimes help. So there's all the help. This is the built-in documentation. And there's timeout. See, it's part of the definition, the signature of the function. So that's probably how I found out about that. So we'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of that. And then we'll just repeat this block. You can click anywhere in the block and repeat the code. Repeat the code, repeat running the cell, right? So you can click on the output. And these are probably not a single one of these is a repeat of something it fetched before. I hope, if it's counting up to 800 every time, I have done something wrong, and that might actually be the case. It looks like I might have something wrong. And watch this grow. So while that's going, I'll just check my code and make sure I have, oh, it's a domain name from Cameroon. Had to pronounce, okay, cool. So the place where this could go wrong is, oh, I might not have put it back in there as a result of the rewriting of stuff. So for key and if not resp, if type equals response, and this is where I fetch the new stuff. But you don't want to do it if the key is already in there. The active fetch has occurred here. If not resp, oh, so this could get caught in a loop if the fetched data does not end up being a response data type, or it comes back with none again. None again, jiggity jig. And it definitely counted up to that 800 number again. It's definitely repeating stuff. So I just got to make sure I do the check that the URL is not in there with a good response. So it's reinitializing as none if yeah, I got it. If link not in DB. Links equals for link in links. If link not in DB. I left out a critical little line. Otherwise, yeah, I made the same mistake twice is what I did. I made this mistake earlier. I'm making the mistake now. It just keeps rewriting over, say, the homepage link that happened before with none. So, of course, it has to recrawl it when it gets back in here. So this will be one of those large 800 link crawls one more time, but not the time after that. So I'll find something else to talk about while we waste all this bandwidth. It's against GitHub. Thank you, Uncle Microsoft, right? Who pays for this? Microsoft pays for this. And you don't pay more for your home broadband by crawling over and over again. So there's really no downside to this. You're not upsetting some small internet, WordPress host where it's like, oh, why are you doing intrusion detection? We should be stopping you. It's GitHub. It's GitHub. It's Microsoft. You could do this all day and it wouldn't start to even impact on their resources. So, sweat it not. Sweat it not. He cannot learn. He has no patience. He will learn patience. And, some final notes here is this is not backed up in Git and GitHub for that matter. I tend to not do it because it's a notebook and it's not really that much code. But, it certainly couldn't hurt. While this is going on, I could jump over here, cd ... over to practice 2. Git. We'll do an ls for before and after, clear ls, right? There's not much in there, ls-a to show the invisible files as well. There's only current directory and directory above, and the IPython notebook checkpoints, which is just like undos for notebooks. I can do git init. It is now, if we do that ls-a, it now has one more invisible directory, a git directory. And I can do git add, let's see, Webcrawler. That's where the code that we just did is. Git commit, notebook in repo. And that's it. It's now tracked in a Git repository. It's not in GitHub yet. It's not offsite. If my machine crashed, the code would be lost, but that'll be for another video. Okay, that's done. And before and after, we'll see one more time. It got up to that 800 or some number, 803. But on the next run, everything that's already been crawled should be skipped. Should be. Yeah, look, it only went to 10 and said done. 10 and done. Is it the same ones over again? Yep, these are ones that are not returning good status code. So where we print stuff, we will also print. Oh, if not resp, it can't print unless it's that. So this is the stubborn final URLs. Crawler done. This is part of the diagnostic. These are the pages that couldn't be crawled but have links to it. So these remain none in the database, and a recrawl attempt is done each time. So if you really wanted to, have something to take the place of recursion, and then I'll show it to you from scratch. For, we already use I, so we didn't use X. For X in range 10, we'll do 10 passes. That's equivalent roughly to a crawl depth of 10, and we'll just indent that by 1. And in a moment, we'll call this done. Delete the database. Delete failed. That's okay. Who knows what creates file locks? Who knows what evils lurk within the heart of Microsoft? Okay. restart kernel. Restarting the kernel should eliminate that file lock. There, file lock gone, file gone. Combine those two so that the initialization is in the same code block there. We don't need this anymore. That was just diagnostic. This is the full crawler. It's the full crawler, my friends. We'll put one print here just to indicate next loop. It's outside this if. But no, that's inside a for loop in enumerate database, so outside this loop. In fact, it just belongs to this loop. I should have known at first glance. It's at this. We'll just try and make it nice and big and visible. In fact, I import ML SEO, so that should have an H1 available there. And since we have a X, loop X, make it an F string. All right, now that should be pretty good. I guess that should be an H2, and then this should be an H1, something like that. I don't know. What does it matter? And let's crawl. Make sure we have the asterisk to show it's running. There's the initialization. I accidentally clicked the link, but it's still going. It got that little parser thing. It's a zero-based index, so we will see the 0 through 9, right? 0 through 9 we're going to see printed because of the zero-based index. There's loop 1. Loop 1 gets all the things off of my old blog, the ones that have the dates in the URLs. And it's about 540, so this isn't too bad, right? Exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. For me, I don't know what excites you, but for this to be in the ability level of an average person, now honestly, as smart as I might look from all this, I am not even in the league of people who do like low-level programming of like drivers and operating systems and that use C and keep track of a zillion things in their mind. They are their own garbage collectors. There is another level of this stuff of which I am most certainly not. I enjoy the reward. I enjoy the rewards of the master tool makers, specifically. Oh, 5:40 p.m. there. It's a.m. for me. You're on the other side. Where are you from? Australia? Tell me about yourself. Ted Jude. Yeah, I'll let you send me a phonetic if you care to. But I'm guessing you're Australia or New Zealand, Japan maybe. Loop 3, so it got through that big stuff. And loop 4, now you're probably going to see the repetition of the uncrawlables. So this is not recursion, my friends. This is just, iterating through loops fixed amounts of times. So that'll get up to 9 and then it's done. See, done. And then, we've got a pretty clear list, the ones that still have nones in the database. Shanghai. Ooh, nice. Nice. I can call you Boni, B-O-N-I, Bonnie. Okay, cool. China, Shanghai. This is great. This is such a success. So it took me 2 videos. If anyone was following this one, you can look at my last video under live on my channel, which, by the way, I have astoundingly my URL on YouTube is my name. So just like the site I've been showing you is mikelev.in, my site is my name. On YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/MikeLevin. Now, you don't have to put the dot after the IN. I actually got my custom domain name, and there it is. So this is today's thing. That's really huge and important. But on yesterday's thing, you can probably go into my videos and then go into live. I don't know. Step 1, persistent dictionaries, Python SEO, step 1, persistent dictionaries. I renamed it. You don't have to watch the whole 2 hours and 22 minutes. I probably get to the point much earlier in it. But it's like, even with all this work to create this little crawler here, it all is based on the simple trick of persistent dictionaries. This line here contains so much of the important magic of this that most people who use Python don't have access to that. You know, it takes a pip install of a library that is just not very popular. You have to pip install SQLite dict so that you can treat SQLite as a dict. At least they call it what it is, right? There's ways to do this with shelves, and I'm the first to admit, when I got started with this, you would, import shelf, and you would have something like the same functionality as this line, except with about 1/10 or 1/100th of the speed, unbearably low, bad speed. It was unusable. So maybe optimizations in Python will fix that. But who needs it? SQLite is high performance. It's built in, one little pip install, and you've got the dictionary API on it. The dictionary API, which you see represented here, needs to be used in conjunction with a commit. It's like having a Python standard dictionary that requires dictionary name.commit so that it stores it in memory in the hard drive, and a line following the Python context manager to establish the dictionary name. Okay, so that was the whole subject of yesterday's video, nearly as long as how this is going. But that was just talking with people like you, Bonnie, for most of that towards the end. But once that trick is down, the crawler becomes much, much more easy. And you can see not a single function is used in this. Show me another crawler. Show me another Python web crawler. And it's like, oh, not using functions is a good thing? Yeah, not using functions is a good thing. Not when you want to keep it understandable and read it top down and have it run in a Jupyter notebook and actually know what you're doing. So you'll find plenty of crawler examples out there which are somewhat as short as mine in code, but you will not find ones that are as simple in essence. Okay, so let me do a final thing before I wrap up for the night, because there's so much here. We're going to hide that output, and we're going to use that same line at the top of the context manager. For key in DB, print key. And we'll take that one extra step of saying for I comma key in enumerate DB, so that we can say print I +1. We'll get rid of the zero-based index thing. And this is all the URLs that got crawled. And it's stored in a local database that you can bring up Internet Explorer, and you can see it. How big is it? It's about 8 megabytes, 8,652 kilobytes, crawl.db right there. So right off the bat, you don't need Microsoft Access, you don't need SQL Server, you don't need MySQL, you don't need Redis. You don't need any of these things that traditionally people would think you would need at this point, because SQLite is a great gift to developers, and it's built into like everything, the way regex is. So if you have something that's using a built-in regex engine, take a look, see if it has built-in SQL Server too. You know, this is the P in the pool of tech. This is where your muscle memory should be. If you want to learn a particular SQL implementation, a vendor-specific flavor of a language, instead of Microsoft Transact SQL, try some SQLite. It might last you the rest of your life. Okay, so there's that, 800 pages, 8 megabytes. It's all the view source. There's no graphics. This is not a graphics crawl, nor is it a browser rendered crawl where the DOM object is actually constructed as it goes. But as you can see from my MLSEO library that makes PyPatir a requirement, that's one of the directions we're going. I could have just as easily used a browser in this process. Not just as easily. It would have been harder and an even longer video. But it's certainly coming. But I could have used a real browser, Google Chrome, rendered the page, stored the DOM and all the context of the page load along with the DOM, like I stored the request's response object. And then I could create thumbnails. We could go look at what the page looked like. We could archive the graphics that got loaded with it. It could be a really full and complete crawl that renders the Java, executes the JavaScript. But, this is the second video. How much can you get in a crawler after the second video? So the last thing I want to do is that same loop that actually shows something about the pages to show, set the stage for the third thing. I'm sitting on top of, well, first of all, the data. So let's say the response object equals the DB with the key plugged in. And if the type of the response is equal to response and resp dot, and you might say, how can you refer to something inside the object if you don't even know it's a response object yet? It's because of Python short circuiting. If it can't get through this, it's not going to get through this, and it won't throw an error. So you can go status code equals 200. Make that a little bigger. Then instead of printing, that, let's print the extracted title of resp.text. Boom! I got a title tag problem. Don't believe me? You think that's the data of the first iteration of the loop slipping through? Well, let's look at something where I don't have the problem, which is extract meta, which defaults to the meta description. And it's different. See, different. So I got there are runs where it's the same. So I do have places where it's a problem, but that's not loop leakage, as one might suspect. That's just me setting the description wrong. And you can see that because up in this area of the site, different description per page. And now you can diagnose a site, and you can do it without Screaming Frog. And you have the power of regular expressions. You have the power of a bunch of other stuff that layers in now because Python. How will it perform on a larger scale? Okay, good question. Not as good as Deep Crawl. Perhaps better than Screaming Frog. Less overhead. This doesn't have all that Java, engine, Java runtime engine overhead. It does have the Python runtime engine overhead, but I think it's lighter weight. And being back-ended with SQLite keeps it lightweight. And but at this point, not having browser rendering keeps it lightweight. When we add browser rendering, it'll get a little more heavyweight. If we add browser rendering plus concurrency, it might have some problems scaling. But at this point, aside from the weight of sequential mode, it should scale quite nicely. I'd be pretty confident pulling down 1 million pages with this. million pages. I'm not going to say it's not a problem, but I'll say it's doable. 100,000 pages, no problem. Okay. But if you start to inch your way to 1,000,000 pages, instead of using SQLite Dict, you would find something that has a similar API mapping, because APIs can be made to look like each other. It's all just a shell game. And you would do this with Redis. You would do this with Redis or Postgres as opposed to SQLite. And then you could scale to millions of pages, you know. So it sets the stage for scaling, but for its current state, I'd limit it to 100,000 or maybe a 500,000 pages to not drive yourself nuts. Yeah, thank you. You know, in work all the time, I just keep my mouth shut. You know, everyone's a Screaming Frog fan, and God bless them. You know, it's a great product. I recommend it for $100 a year for the license. It's honestly a good product. You should buy it. It should be part of your SEO toolkit. However, for this not to be part of your SEO toolkit, look at how much of Screaming Frog you're replacing with what? I guess Escape, Shift L. Yeah, with 34 lines of code. 34 lines of code. This is just the display. You can't count it towards that. So for collecting the data of a site, it's, you know, 34, 33, 32, 31 actual lines of code versus Screaming Frog. So, you know, how could it not be part of your toolbox? How could every SEO in the world not be watching this video and turning it into a cornerstone of how they work? Honestly, I just don't understand it. Now, yeah, okay, I'm sprinkling a little magic fairy dust in there too, but it's free and open source fairy dust. You can go look at it in PyPy. You don't have to just pip install it and take it on faith. You can go to GitHub and just examine it, and you can look at it just like I'm looking at it here in the notebook, but through GitHub. There's nothing special or mysterious. It's just some more code, and not that much of it either. Any other questions? This is a really great point this is at. I'm so thrilled with this video. Thanks for joining me, you folks. I'll see who else is with me, and I'll close my tab slowly to answer any questions. This thing is such a liar. Ugh. But, you know, I know that there still might be people with me when this reads 0. And I'll just close these other things and answer questions as I go. Nothing there. These things are not always as supported as they might be, but you know, when they get it right and it's been around for a while, it's okay. You know, if SQLite Dict goes away and you can no longer pip install it, or it breaks because of some major change, it's not many lines of code either, and someone else will re-implement it in a day. Or you could use one of the other implementations that really do exist. You can go searching for things that treat SQLite like a standard Python dictionary. There's others. This is the one I chose because it is what it says, and it doesn't do much more than that. There's certain issues as to whether keys have to be pickled when they're tuples. Yeah, keys have to be pickled when they're tuples. It's a little bit of a downside, but, you know, implicit is better than explicit. Yeah, my old site, you can read my old thing, my claims to fame. My claims to fame is Pipulate. It's kind of like MLSEO before MLSEO. I have to update Pipulate. It's going to be a bunch of examples of using MLSEO. Linux, I have my own version of Linux, which is really a respin of Linux. It's not really my own version. I take tiny core Linux, cram it into QEMU, and make sure it can run with a double click from the desktop of a Mac, a Windows machine, or other Linux desktops. KDE and GNOME, Linux is known to run on. I was one of the first people to unbox a Raspberry Pi. I recognize the significance of things. I recognize the significance of WSL install under Windows 11. Linux under Windows almost didn't exist until Windows 11 because it doesn't make you jump through hoops. WSL space hyphen install. That changes the world as much as the Raspberry Pi did in its day. So that's why I'm sort of building that up. I worked for one of the great marketing companies of previous years, the one who did You Can Still Dunk in the Dark, and a lot of my identity got associated with them. And Python back in 2011, I was at the top of the search engines on Python because I was talking about how wonderful it was before other people, and everyone's jumped on the bandwagon since, and now I can't even break into the search results on it. It's such a popular topic. I made a web suggestion tool, a Web 2.0 era keyword suggestion tool called HitTail. It's now gone, but it was there. And other stuff, that's my old website. Let's see if there's any questions as I go. You have to go watch, more of my videos. Just found my channel today. Well, thank you. Yeah. It's not edited. It's a lot of stuff. I probably should curate my videos better. That'll be one of the little projects I do. Let me put that on my notes. Organize for audience. Curate, C-U-R-E, curate YouTube videos. Now, don't wait for me to do that. It could take forever, but I know I really should do that. Oh, my resume. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I've been around the block. That isn't even talking about Commodore and Scala. I've been in the digital signage industry for, over 8 years. And I've worked for Commodore Computers, the people who made that little gray box that changed the world, or beige box, which depending on which production run you're looking at. I was a teenager then, but, I worked for them, a student intern. I knew a lot of those people. It was really amazing. Hope Windows 11 treating me well. As you can see, I'm still really on Windows 10. Windows 11 is sitting on this box, experimentally, waiting for all the things that I consider requirements to fall into place. Well, the one thing I consider requirement, you see the way I work? How can I work without this left-right transition? It's such an easy thing, and Windows 11 doesn't have it. So I'm not on Windows 11, and I won't be until they get the screen transition down. As an old Amiga user, I know usability. You can't take such a major step forward, win over people like me, and then take that out. I can't tell I'm switching screens without a transition like that. Now, Amiga didn't have that transition either. They had to do Amiga N, but that was 35 years ago, so F Microsoft. No need to curate. I prefer raw programming and problem solving than filtered content. Excellent. Yeah, I have some hope. So I've never really blown up on YouTube. I have 2 million view videos. And the feedback loop, the YouTube algorithm is rewarding me for only my already successful videos. So my little videos don't break in. I try. Here's my uploads, all the new stuff. Here's some featured stuff that I put together saying, hey, I made nice icons for them, so it's worth looking at. But here's the popular videos, and the popular videos seem to always and forever just be the ones that are caught in this feedback loop of, it's what people search for, so it's what gets suggested, so it's the only thing, is my 2 million view videos, but no blowing up. Okay, message is held for review. Doing well. I'll show that. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, sadly so. Yeah, such is life, For people who want the genuine article, people who are unlike other YouTubers, people who'd rather live stream like this than edit, I can be found. I'm trying to do things here and there. You know, I'm not without the ability to market myself. I just consider it a huge waste of time. I mean, who in the world has an identity like this, right? Look at how much is going on there. Plus a poem to go with it that ties to my name in a clever way. You know, I don't know what to say. It's not like I think I should blow up based on this kind of stuff, but I have the potential. I'm laying down a lot of groundwork that will release the potential once things fall in place. So certainly having a hyper optimized blogging system will do a lot of it. So pages like this will help a lot. Once I fix that title tag problem, all the crosshairs will be lined up of SEO. And then I'll do a few other things like to make sure I don't overwhelm these things with links. But all the crosshairs are lined up, right? I'm just not targeting keywords that are really searched on. I'm lining up the crosshairs, but not keyword researching to step into the path of search. But I could. If I wanted to do finger magic, if I wanted to teach people how to do the French drop, here's the French drop. So look, it's a coin. I take it. Of course, you know it's in this hand, right? I say I drop it, so I can't do it held up like that. But I can do some hand magic other than the fateful finger removal. I know some other basic finger magic. I could even do the silly stuff like this. Oh, look, the pen's floating. I'm just holding my hand steady, right? Pen's floating. So the stuff that doesn't matter, well, you know, it touches people's lives. It matters. But the small stuff I blow up over, and the big stuff that really could make a difference in people's lives, not so big. One of the important ones, let's see. I think I put it at the bottom of this. I talked about Ikagai. I don't know. But I'm actually just trying to help people with having a purpose in life. You know, you could do a lot worse than mastering the tools of Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. And really, in so many other ways, just silencing your mind. There's so much noise out there, and everyone wants the audience to get lots of noise in their head. You know, very few things, you know, portray that, convey that more than the full web stack, which in my mind is the rat race, the hamster wheel, the fire in motion. And this might be one of the places where I wrap it up. Fire in motion is just such an important concept. I converted to WSL because of the videos gave the boost to it. You know, well, you're welcome. I'm very glad it's helping you. One of the articles that really helped shape me, and he went back on it. Joel Spolsky said this, and he went back on it because Microsoft won him over. Microsoft pulled him into the fold. But, you know, Joel Spolsky, Fire and Motion. Read this article. Read Joel Spolsky's Fire in Motion article. This is very, 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 very important. Couldn't hurt me to read it again. All right. Other things that you really must read. Seminal articles, right? To have a similar perspective as me, to reproduce the chain of dependencies, to think about things the way I do. Even though it's not Python, you must read Paul Graham's essays. The essays by Paul Graham. There's not a lot of them. You don't, well, there's more than there used to be. But It's got one on Lisp. What made Lisp different? Roots of Lisp, Lisp for web-based applications. I guess what makes Lisp different? Oh, it's just an enumerated list. He has something that is on the verge of religion about why, you know, well, he explains what meta is, right? So meta, just things being meta, is such an important thing to understand. And Lisp does it well. Lisp did it first, and Lisp did it in a way that stuck for over the ages. And in fact, if I were to get to the more fundamental point here, while not having to learn these, fire in motion. So I'll explain Joel Spolsky's fire in motion just so that, you know, you get the point without having to read the article. Soldiers in World War I did trench warfare. They took a trench one at a time, charging forward in surges. They had to duck under enemy fire. And all the work goes into taking the next trench and might kill you. This is moving from dev tool to dev tool in tech. You pay the vendors for upgrades. Now, this was written before free and open source was so big, but so many of Microsoft tools now are free and open source, and this is part of, I guess, why Joel readjusted his view. I don't know. .NET was not free and open source in those days. But in addition to having to pay the vendors for upgrades, there is a consultant feeding frenzy. I hope I'm not using too many American idioms, but, you know, like sharks. Everyone gets money, but you get killed trying to take the next trench. I say don't engage in trench warfare. That's fire in motion. That's the same thing. When I say fire in motion, it's the World War I style. You fire, the enemy ducks, you run forward and take the next trench. That is your retraining. Fire in motion, constant retraining. And so one might ask, what's the difference between retraining and going from Python 3.8 to Python 3.10? A lot. A little retraining is a lot of not retraining, not big retraining. Huh? React.js versus Vue.js, for example, right? There's others, but React and Vue are so dramatically different, but the flock is jumping from React to Vue. It's a lot of retraining. It's a lot of recoding. Django, if you started on Django in 98, you could still be on Django today. Django. See, I'm jumping ahead in what I want to say. You just maybe switch from the Mako templates to Django 2. Jinja, Jinja, Jinja 2. Maybe. Not if you're Reddit, you'd stick with the Mako templates. So there's just not the same fire and motion. There's not the same trench warfare when you choose some timeless obsolescence-proof tools, right? Are timeless, obsolescence-proof. I like saying obsolescence-proof, but you know, most people say future-proofing. You know, you resist disruption. And I could go on. You get the point. Let's see if anyone's still talking. So you program in a Lisp. I was looking at learning Haskell recently. I'm a recovering web developer. Ha ha ha. Well, will do. Thank you. Yeah, so no, I don't really recommend Lisp. I don't program in Lisp. I covet. I am jealous of the true meta wizards of tech who use as their equivalent of Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, right? This is my stack. They use as their equivalent a different tool set, some dialect of Lisp. Emacs as their text editor. And then, you know, question mark, nothing. You know, I couldn't even say anything about the rest stuff because the rest of the stuff they probably wrote themselves. Refer to above 2 points. There's a spiritual issue here. It's also a pragmatic issue. The 80-20 rule, get value out of the first 1/5 of work, of time, work. The 80-20 rule applies to Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. Linux, Python, Vim, and Git work really well with the 80-20 rule, getting value out of your initial effort, front-loading the good stuff back. Lisp, Emacs people can be 100% uncompromising. But the win is later. This is very powerful. So, you know, the original Department of Defense, DARPA, Department of Defense AI contests were won by Lisp wizards. Crossing, you know, California desert, I hope I got that right, with autonomous vehicles. Possible because Lisp. Doesn't apply so much today because Python 80-20 ruled even that. Lisp is for perfectionists. Python is for cheaters, creative thieves. I mean, it sounds bad, but come on, you know, if someone else did something better and you can pip install it, do it. I like to use Django, but Rust does some things better. Okay, I'm going to talk about the C languages, the C derivative languages, and Rust in particular. There's a passage where he talks about his Rust deploys and that a single executable for different systems and also can be run in the browser. Don't quote me on it. Yeah, okay, so, okay. Not only is there room for Rust and Go language, they should be used where appropriate. I love Python because I'm not a professional developer. I don't write drivers, OSs, or native apps. Those things are usually best with some language that's like C, but fixes its biggest headaches. Go language did that for Google. Great. Many advantages. Rust is doing it in many other places. Also awesome. You know, what I advocate is for mere mortals, not professional developers. So programming, coding, whatever, is just plain literacy. It's not computer literacy. It's not really even tech. It's just communicating without many of the shortcomings of spoken languages, of human spoken languages. Autistic? Maybe. Import this. And if you don't know the import this reference, go ahead into a, into a Python environment and type import this. Get into the head of the people who wrote Python. I am similarly aligned to the beauty that was artistically incorporated into the language. These other languages are 100% valid, have their place in the world, can and should be used by a great many people, just not me, and not people who are similarly aligned to me. Oh, what stops me from becoming a professional developer? Why? Okay, so a few things. First of all, someone who is not held to the standard of having to produce professional code and real products, yet has the power of being able to do so at their disposal for everyday tasks, is in a much better position. Many fields of tech, including professional programmer, put you on the hook and make you, I don't want to say slave because it plays down, the actual historical significance, but it makes you much like an indentured servant. Okay, so in particular, web dev, web development, there's a web server. A web server is like a genie. Poof. What do you need? Poof, what do you need? Poof, what do you need? Poof, what do you need? Not my vibe. Linux services are like, here's your daily meal. Here's your daily vitamin. It's exactly what you ordered. I know your requests. Because it's the same as yesterday's. I can expand the menu, but chefs do that very carefully. So Linux services are like web dev is like. And so why is this so bad? Poof, what do you need? Poof, what do you need? Poof, what do you need? The request change all the time. You're responsible for the genie's, fill in the blank, right? It's so many things. I could go on. You get the hopefully you get the idea. I should probably move the chat back over to that window. In fact, I'll do that. And so Linux services sounds so weird. It sounds so much different than web dev, but it really is just scheduling. It's just scheduling and doing anything you could do in a Jupyter notebook and automating it. It's data science. It's all kinds of stuff. It's ad hoc investigation. So it's not just Linux services. This is just the automated bit. When it's automated. When it's not automated, it's exploratory programming. Or, the way I like to think of it, it's creative exploration, usually in a Jupyter notebook, which isn't the point. The point of a Jupyter notebook is, again, the exploratory programming. It's hard to put words on it. It's going to be a big thing over the next 5 or 10 years that, it's just literacy. If you want to research it, you research Donald Knuth. I'll Google it. Donald Knuth. Literacy, programming literacy, computer literacy. You got to use some word in it to differentiate it from literacy the way other people think about it. But what they're really talking about is what we talk today about as REPL, read, eval, print loops. But yuck as a word but yay equals the reality. You know, what happens in Jupyter is just so different than most other programming environments. You saw me do it in this session. As much as I love Vim, this is not like working in Vim. You saw the evolution of this, how easy it was, how clean it became, how interactive the process was. And even right now, all this is just sitting in memory, waiting to be looked at again. You want to see the last URL that was there? There's the last URL that was used. It's the only place the URL was used because down here it was key. You want to see the key? Last key that was used, there's that. Last one that it got to. The list goes on and on, you know. Any other questions before I wrap up? It's gone on for a bit here. Got quite philosophical, but, you know, I have no interest in being a professional developer. I see what it's like for those people in their day jobs. It's not for me. Samurai warrior of tech. Samurai warrior of tech isn't working like a, you know, workhorse. They're standing by, ready to slice off a head. You know, it's horrible, but really that's what samurais were. They worked for their, you know, their masters, their lords, so that when war needed to be avoided, they could use their tools very efficiently. And that's the exact equivalent today of getting data, prepping data, transforming data, and you know, making it pretty and delivering it to people who need it. The value is just like that of ye old samurai slicing off a head. I mean, you know, it's a horrible way to put it, but honestly, it's a better way of working. Yeah, especially when you must print reports in article formats to hand out. Yeah, Yuvak Christian, hi there. Yeah, feel free to chime in, Yuvak. I'm sort of winding down. Last Chain and Tajudije. Oh yeah, Bonnie. You know, feel free to chime in any last things, but you know, it's a shrinking window now. 6:30 a.m. for me. I got started at around, you know, I guess 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30. This is epic. This is 3 hours, but this is what it's going to take to blow up without editing. I'm putting less time into this with the 3-hour live cast than people who edit their videos. They would just be getting started on their editing, sliding things back and forth, going, how can I fake the audience into thinking I know what I'm talking about and edit it so that I look perfect to everybody, you know? I'm in my Iron Man pants now and my old Wolf t-shirt from my kid and, you know, drinking my coffee, and I don't care, you know? This is me. So clearly, my next steps now, I'll summarize my next steps. You know, using the crawl discoveries to fix MikeLev.in. Boom, boom, boom. Especially the title tags. And we do this through the GitHub pages Jekyll. system. The and my blog slice and dice system. It was a great stream. I learned some very good points from you, from your thoughts. Thanks again. Oh, you're welcome. It is my pleasure. Chain is a anagram. Last chain. Chain is an anagram for my name, so chain is fine. Glad seeing you. Glad seeing you as well. Yuvak, I saw you just chimed in once with a hi. So if you have anything specific, time running out. I'll give you 1 minute while I go and close down my windows and see if there's any other parting shots I want to say. Joel Spolsky, his articles in general, but Fire in Motion in particular, should be read. Paul Graham, the creator of Yahoo Stores and the spiritual leader of Y Combinator, Yahoo's incubator company. Read some of his essays, you know. My site, help me blow up. I mean, people say your first 1,000 followers is the hardest and then it's easy after that. I don't find that at all. I went from 1,000 to 10,000 over a period of like 10 years and it's still going slow. Python Context Manager, try finally. If you want to get some cool Pythonic stuff in your mind, research the Python Context Manager, understand the usually with open, but with SQL dict in the case of what we've been doing. Tim Berners-Lee, and of course Vint Cerf is the other one. Wish there were more women in that, but if you want to research some cool women in this, Ada Lovelace. And the, I always forget her name, it's Cooper. I want to say Alice Cooper, but it's not Alice Cooper, but it's the inventor of COBOL. There's some women in tech. Grace Mary Hopper. I don't know why I think Alice Cooper, but there's two cool women. Grace Mary Hopper and Ada Lovelace, to understand that women are just as core and fundamental and in many ways more transformative of the world of tech than men. The HTTP request for comments specification. Read it, if not from top to bottom, then just to get the gist of it. There's so many questions that are asked in SEO that are just answered by this document. My blog, follow along as I line up the crosshairs and start getting good search hits on my stuff. And that's it. Final questions. Yep. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again soon. And don't forget to subscribe, thumbs up, do the thing that alerts you or whatever. Tune into my live streams, yada, yada, yada.